Leadership communication, what are the secrets of it? I'll share a few observations. There's no right or wrong way to communicate. Many different types of people do it in different ways, so we mustn't be too prescriptive. But one general observation that I have is that there is the outer game. There are the things that we do in terms of the messages we deliver, how we deliver them, how we stand our voice, and whether it all makes sense. And then there's the inner game, what's going on in there, and how that can block people becoming effective communicators. One story to start off with, working with a very successful entrepreneur in the Middle East. He built a unicorn, a fintech company that was worth over $1 billion. Good looking guy, he was in the gym, six-pack. And he was very compelling in one-to-one conversations, very charismatic in small groups. He had a lot to say and a lot to give in terms of the lessons of leadership, how to build companies and how to do this really well with massive impact. We're training him to go out there and start to speak in public for the first time, do media interviews, get on the stage. And the first time he went onto the platform, he had all the material ready to go. He had brilliant stories, he had great points that he wanted to make. But of course, when he got onto the platform, something was blocking him, either in there or there. And he didn't totally freeze, but he was 10% of the person that I'd seen in the privacy of the coaching. Something stopped. 3 months later, after doing quite a few interviews, after doing more speaking in safer spaces, after engaging in different ways with the people in his organization, he went to a very similar conference, went up onto the stage, and he was again looking nervous. I thought, he's not going to make it, he's not going to do it. And then I just saw him catch a deep breath, find a moment, it caught his eye, he smiled, and something changed within him. And he was able to release the energy that I'd seen, the ideas that he had, the charisma that was within him. Somehow, he was mastering the inner game as well as the outer game. And I think this is what, for me, we get to when we talk about leadership communication, what it means. That balance between the external and the internal. So I think there are a few things I'd like to talk about in terms of the outer game, and then I'll talk about the inner game, and then we'll wrap up and take any questions that you have. The outer game for me as a journalist and working for many years on complicated stories is about simplicity. And as one BBC News editor said to me many years ago, and I've remembered this all my career since, the two keys to journalism and communication: one, decide what to leave out, and two, decide what else to leave out. Right? Always try to get to a point of greater clarity and greater simplicity. And clarity about what you stand for, and that could just be one word for some people, but also clarity about where you're going. You say, okay, I want to climb mountains. You can't aim for 20 different peaks. You've got to aim for one peak, and then you might have a chance of getting there. So leadership for me in terms of the outer game is about clarity about the vision, the decisiveness, where you're going, but also honesty with your audience about any huge obstacles that are in your way. If you want to climb that mountain and there's an ice field that's blocking you from getting to the summit, you need a plan to get over that ice field. You need a way of getting to the summit. So strategy and leadership is also about being honest and clear about the challenges ahead. And we're living in chaotic times, an uncertain world, huge challenges in the world, huge volatility. The crystal balls aren't just a little bit cloudy, they're smashed into 1,000 pieces. No one can see the future. In that context, we need leaders who have, yes, clarity about where they want to go, but also a degree of calm when the world is as tricky and as volatile and as mixed up as it is. So those are all some of the aspects of the outer game. What about the inner game? Where does that come from? We've heard some hints tonight when we talk about emotional intelligence, we talk about getting rid of the blockages, we talk about opening up, we talk about releasing some of the positive energy. Who's got kids in the room? Who's got children or nieces or nephews? Okay. Children are natural communicators, right? Children can play roles. They have a natural affinity for stories. They love stories. Children can express what they want very clearly. They can modulate their voices higher and lower. So when we're born to communicate. We're born to connect with audiences. Somehow as we get older, these blockages start and things hold us back from being the communicators that we can be and storytellers that perhaps we were when we were younger. So getting into a position of better leadership communication is about releasing some of that, a state of flow that, again, those who've been in coaching situations will be familiar with this concept of flow. When you're in the moment, when you're present right there at this time, the words are coming through you. They're not in your head, they're being received and you're passing them on to the audience. And that's a beautiful position to get into. And leaders, in my experience, either as a BBC reporter interviewing them or training them and trying to advise them as best I can, the ones that can find that state of flow are the ones that generally succeed. But there's a problem. There's a monkey on your shoulder that's often stopping you. There's that voice saying, who are you? Are you good enough? Do you have anything interesting to say? Do people even want to hear about this? Do they care? Does any of it matter? And getting that monkey off your shoulder is a lot to do with changing that mindset from a mindset where I'm thinking all about me. What do I know? What do I want to share? Changing it to the giver's mindset of what can I share with this audience? How can I help them? How can I give them more value? How can I empower them as well? Coming to connect with your passions is an important part of leadership communication in terms of the inner game. We want to hear from people who genuinely believe what they're talking about. And you can spot it a mile off. I had a conversation with my son recently and he introduced me to a concept called radical honesty. He said, people don't want bullshit anymore from companies or individuals. They want people to stand up and be completely honest with what they are and what they are not, whether it's a company or an individual or any kind of entity. And my son said, radical honesty for us, for the Gen Z, is like crack cocaine. And I said, perhaps that's not something that you want to talk about with your father. But anyway, it's an important reminder that here's another generation that's grown up with digital marketing, that's had every single version of the sell pushed at them all the time, that's had a gap, yawning gap often, between what people are saying and what they're doing. Purpose washing, greenwashing, people pretending to be something they're not. So radical honesty is something that we need to focus on and we need to try and keep ourselves accountable for. And maybe that's where Forum and other networks of trusted individuals can help you to be honest when you communicate and when you try to reach the audiences you want to reach. And I think in doing that as well, we heard a line earlier about the balance of communication between listening and projecting. And the first day I started work in a communications agency after leaving journalism, the CEO took me to one side and he said, good consultants listen. Good communications advisors listen. You listen first. So you go into any organization and you try and understand what they're about. You try and listen to who they are. And I think that goes for leaders too. Leaders who just come to me and say, how can you help me project better? It usually starts with them trying to listen a bit more first and find out what people really want and what they need. So that's what I work on with the individuals that I work with around the world. We're trying to work on the outer game, clarity about their messages, communication strategy, if you like, how to deliver things, stories, but also the inner game. How do we release their good natural energy? How do we get into that state of flow? How do we get the monkey off their shoulder? How do we get to a point of equanimity where there is balance, the even soul, freedom from what Shakespeare called the torrents and tempests of the mind? That's what we need to aim for in leadership communication. But this is not an act that you can put on. This is not you trying to step into somebody's shoes. This is you being yourself You cannot pretend to be something or someone that you're not. And authenticity is a much overused word, but in communication, it is still the most powerful way to reach your audience. So I'll wrap up there, and thank you very much. And happy to take any questions in the final minutes that we have on leadership and communications. Yes.
Thank you for yet another very inspiring contribution. We've heard many words of wisdom this evening from a range of people, but it strikes me they've all been from men. And I'm just wondering, are men better at balancing the inner game and the outer game?
Possibly the opposite. But I wouldn't like to make sweeping generalizations. But I feel that you're right, and what we need to avoid is that sense of forcing the balance and saying, right, there's one way of working that is going to be suitable for women and is different to the way that men work. In my experience, we're talking about people, we're talking about what unlocks the potential of people. But definitely in the business world, we need more female leaders to step forward. And the frustration I have is that when I'm working with companies, I work with brilliant women in the early stage of their career, and then they leave the organisation. And then a few months later, we look around and we think, where did all those great women go? And that's been a particular problem in recent years. It's something that, of course, as a society, we need to work on. Yes?
I'm interested to know about the entrepreneur that you were speaking about.
Yeah.
3 months later, having worked with you, I think, something unlocked on that stage. Was there a toolkit you used to get in there? Why was it that particular moment you think that something clicked for him and he was able to deliver what he was there to deliver in a more natural form?
Yes, there were tools that we used. We used tools of visualization, visualizing success. We used tools of minimization as well, stepping outside of yourself and floating upwards. We did meditations. We did a lot of training, a lot of practice. But all of that can count for very little, actually. If when the moment comes, the individual cannot connect to something outside of themselves, they can't adopt that giver's mindset that I was talking about was so important. And it could have gone either way. And on that occasion, I just think that there was a moment where the moderator was introducing him, and he had enough time just to breathe a few times to connect with the important messages that he wanted to deliver, not about himself. And so on that occasion, he was able to step outside himself. And then once he's done it once, then it's just repetition and repetition. So he's now got a reference point to go back to say, actually, when I want to be a good communicator on the stage, that's where I'm going to. And that's the kind of movie you need to play in your mind, which if you've got that as a communicator and as a leader, that can be a very, very powerful reference point to go back to.
How do you get the gentleman to active listening? Because you started with CEOs come to you and say, how can you help me project? And you say, well, you've got to listen to the people. And then they need to start active listening. How do you get them to do this?
I focus on audiences. So the first thing that I would ever do when I was going into work with a company or an individual is say, look, who do you want to reach? Who are these people? And if they don't know, then that's where we start the process. And so if you don't know, you ask them. You go around your audiences and you ask them. So you've got some key investors. What do you need to hear from us? What are you most interested in? Do you know who we are? And listen to your clients, listen to your customers, listen to your stakeholders, listen to your investors. And then soon they realize the power of doing that, the listening approach, is far more important than coming up with this brilliant sort of messaging structure they want to project to the world. Because that messaging structure will be useless if they don't have audiences that are receptive. If audiences are selfish, audiences come to something and they want to get something back very quickly. They don't want to be, preached at. They want value. And so to ask in your mind, who are these people? What do they want? What can I give them? That unlocks the power of doing it. But yeah, it works better with some individuals than others.